Hi, past, present, and future homeowners. It's your homegirl, Justina, and welcome back to the Property Buyer's Guide, brought to you by the Brief publication in collaboration with FNB Namibia. So today's topic is quite an interesting one. We will be talking about costs, transfer costs, bond costs, bank admin costs. What are they, and what is the role of a conveyancer in the home buying process? So I will allow my guest to introduce himself today.
Hi Justina, I must say what a pleasure to see you again and a privilege to be on your show today.
Thank you.
So for the benefit of all your viewers, my name's Abe Malherbe. I'm an admitted legal practitioner with the High Court. I'm also a conveyancer and a notary public, and I work at Dr. Weder Kauta in Aveka, where I practice mostly conveyancing.
Okay, so you mentioned conveyancer. Can you explain to us what is a conveyancer and what is their role in the home buying process?
So a conveyancer is essentially a legal practitioner also admitted at the High Court, but then after you're admitted you can additionally accredit yourself with passing a conveyancing exam that's held by the Board of Legal Education, which essentially denotes that you've specialized essentially in property and everything related to property, limited real rights and mortgage bonds and everything else. But that entails obviously urban, sectional titles, township establishments and everything else like that. So that at least is the legal definition if one puts it like that.
Okay.
And I think from a more practical perspective, to understand what a conveyancer does is to understand what the right to property means. So just briefly, the Constitution of Namibia says every citizen shall have the right to own property, to divest property and to trade with it as they wish essentially, subject to a bit of substantive law. So to give proper efficacy to that right, obviously, you need a system that works very well, that essentially guarantees security of title, that is accurate and it says to people your right to property is indisputable. So ultimately for any person selling a home, the question why a conveyancer and why to use a conveyancer and all that type of thing, you can imagine a person being divested of their most valuable asset essentially. That asset that is the biggest asset on their balance sheet, where their credit worthiness comes from, that they've saved for many years. When you want to divest yourself of property, you must get a commensurate counter value of money flowing to you. You're not going to do that without a third party that is impartial, that is neutral, and it guarantees if you are divested of property, you will get that counter flow, which is that reciprocal flow of money back to you and maybe your creditors. So ultimately, a conveyancer, if I can use an example, is much like a trapeze artist. You stand you essentially have to very finely balance everything, and if you don't, it goes wrong in a big way because the amounts are big. It's always in the millions or 500,000 or so on. So you can imagine it's standing between various conflicting interests and rights and making sure everyone walks out happy. So for the buyer, they essentially sign a power of attorney. The seller signs a power of attorney and divest themselves of their ownership. I need to secure in my trust account all their money. I need to talk to his current mortgagees who have mortgages over their homes to cancel their mortgages. They need assurance that they will get their money that's owed to them if their mortgage is cancelled. I need to assure the person who's who's financing this acquisition of a property, that if they register a mortgage bond and give that person the money to buy that property, that it is properly secured and that they have security of title, that their collateral is good essentially. So it ultimately comes down to a person that can make sure everyone walks out of this very complex transaction and sits in the middle like a spider in a web almost, and makes sure every single strand is taken care of. The municipality has duly paid its rates and taxes. The municipal building compliance is obtained, which essentially means that the improvements that manifest on the earth or on the sectional title unit comply with the current building plans. That all third-party interests are covered. NAMRA has been paid its transfer duty. Stamp duties have been paid. So ultimately, we guarantee to the public and to some of the public institutions that the process walks smoothly. And in the end, also, we consider ourselves one of the most successful public-private sector relationships, in a sense that our relationship with the deeds office staff and that is very good. We understand it. and we can deal with each other, and we've got years of knowledge as to how the process should work very well. And ultimately it's a very expensive process because you're dealing with transfer costs and stamp duties and all these types of things.
So ideally what you're doing is, when you look for the services of a conveyancer, you're looking for someone to take that administrative burden away when purchasing or selling a property, and at the same time you're looking for security, because as you mentioned, you're dealing with large amounts of money and there's so many different other entities and moving parts at the same time. So you sort of want that security to know that, listen, this transaction is going to go well and I'm either going to get my money or my house at the end of the day.
Exactly, and that's what we all want. We want Namibians in dignified housing, and you want a happy home buyer. You want to give them the keys at the end of the day, and they need the assurance that for 50 years, as long as they pay maybe the person that financed the house, they are not bothered or so on. And like I say, they can add it to their balance sheet, and it brings a lot of Namibians to creditworthiness. So it's often their proudest moment when you see a person with their new title deed for us. Exactly, like you say, it's expensive. You've got transfer costs, stamp duties, everything else that you need to pay.
So in our previous episodes with the bank, we've discussed transfer costs, and then also most recently you also touched on transfer costs. Can you please explain to us, what are transfer costs, what are bond costs, and who ultimately is responsible for paying these fees during the home buying or selling process?
So when we talk about transfer fees and bond fees, obviously we have to take into account that there's a massive change of landscape at the moment. So the Transfer Duty Amendment Act of 2024, the Stamp Duty Amendment Act of 24 have both been commenced by the relevant minister, and they've had various changes from what we used to know. So, I mean, it's interesting to deal with some before and after scenarios and that. So generally when you deal with transfer fees, it's a bit of an overarching term to deal with a couple of items that you will face when you're buying a new property. You will face a conveyancing fee plus the VAT, which is legally prescribed, and the conveyancer has to ask you that legally. Then you've got your transfer duty, which is charged or levied in terms of the Transfer Duty Act to NAMRA, and then you've got stamp duty, which is levied in terms of the Stamp Duty Act also to NAMRA, and then you have a small deeds office administration fee and so on. The result essentially being that if you go to any conveyancer in town and you would ask them for a quotation based on the amount on the purchase price, you should get something that's essentially the same. It might vary a little bit if they add a fee or some administrative charge, but essentially it's the same, and this gives surety to the public. So let's just quickly appreciate or get a frame of reference as to the changes that have just come in. You would have been aware that previously the prevalence was for everyone to use closed corporations and to put residential properties in terms of urban zone for residential or sectional title units that are residential into CCs. All their nice holiday homes, everything else was put into a CC, and the members' interest would simply transfer at BIPA, and you would not pay any transfer duty. And in the case of a CC, also not stamp duty. So this has essentially been changed, and I think, you know, the tax man wants his taxes. So what has this done, and what's the current new stance? Where previously you could do this and you wouldn't pay transfer duty and it was an easy and a cheap transfer, the current position is now as follows. If you buy the member's interest, some or all of it, in a closed corporation that owns residential property, and that's defined in the new Act. It essentially means something that is used largely as a dwelling or an abode, or an earth that is zoned for residential use. If that closed corporation owns that type of property, residential, the value of the money or the consideration you're paying to transfer the member's interest at BIPA is essentially now going to attract transfer duty. You know, so the result is ultimately that it is not so favorable anymore to buy anything in a CC. And it's the same for trusts and the same for companies now, if you change shares and so on. So I think at a later stage we might speak to how essentially these things are no longer as advantageous or so on. But ultimately, one of the positive changes is the following. Previously, a natural person or a warm body like ourselves, if we took transfer of a property, a sectional title or a earth, which is owned residential, we would transfer it into our own name. Then at 600,000 Namibian dollars, we were exempted from transfer duty and stamp duty. I think those amounts sort of was an amount where they thought that would be good for the affordable housing market. But the prices have gone up and everything else, and I can commend the government for bringing out this new act, because essentially it's raised that exemption to 1.1 million now. So essentially, in terms of transfer duties and stamp duties, a person will now, under this new legislation, pay the exact same amount for those two that they would have paid previously for a house of 600,000. Now you could, for a house of 1.1 million, essentially pay the same. The conveyancer's fees still go up because that's not been changed, but it's a bit of a relief for people in terms of transfer duties and that. So if I can make a bit of let's make a practical example of how that will work. So if you would have bought an earth, a single standing earth, under the old act that has recently been repealed, for 1.1 million Namibian dollars, you would have paid 39,070 Namibian dollars to transfer it into your name as a natural person. Under the new act, you will pay 25,070 Namibian dollars to transfer an earth into your name. So you can see roughly it's a 1/3 discount, which is obviously going to benefit a lot of people, especially if you're a first-time home buyer.
Yes, especially these tough economic times with high interest rates and all these other variables that make home ownership an expensive endeavor.
Exactly, and you've got a lot of people that are young and up and coming and so on, so cost saving is absolutely pivotal to them. And in the context of sectional title units, just quickly, because a lot of people, especially when they're young, they first buy sectional titles because it's just, it occupies a certain niche in the market. You get into a complex and it's just cheaper to acquire one. So a sectional title unit that you transferred into your name previously cost you 35,744 Namibian dollars. And under this new act, it costs you 21,744. So again, about a 1/3 saving. So ultimately, this is good news to everyone. In a sense of saving these people a lot of money. Now, when it comes, so transfer fees is essentially, like I explained, it's a bit of a new era. It's a lot cheaper for people now. It's changed the whole scenario with juristic entities, CCs, companies, and trusts. And there's a lot of, let's say, ambiguousness in the law, and we'll figure it out as we go on. The other topic we've got, obviously, is bond costs. So once you've paid your transfer fees, which I've just explained, you can see it is not a small amount, not an insignificant amount. You still need to cater for your bond fees. A lot of people that are first-time home buyers are not going to buy a home cash, right? Or at least they're not going to pay the full purchase price cash. So inherently, most people, you will go to a banking institution and you'd want to take out a mortgage bond or a sectional mortgage bond to finance this purchase. So very important that one appreciates what that cost is. Because under bond cost, you essentially have your conveyancer's fee, plus their VAT. Then you have your stamp duty, again, that is levied by the Stamp Duty Act and payable to NAMRA. And then you have your small deeds office fee. So, and there's a distinction or a slight difference between what a bond costs for sectional title units and what it costs for normal urban. So just to make an example again, and I'll just do this on 600,000. So let's make an example and say what is a mortgage bond of 600,000 Namibian dollars on an earth that you are financing. So for 600,000 Namibian dollars, it'll cost you 17,444. It's obviously cheap in that instance because you still under the transfer duty exemption, which is the old 600, which is the old 600,000 scenario. What is the scenario with the sectional mortgage bond on a unit that costs 1.1 million Namibian dollars? That'll cost you 25,510. You add that to your transfer fees, it starts growing.
Yes, it does indeed.
Exactly. So you can see, and if I quickly talk to an earth, a 1.1 million mortgage bond over an earth is 30,570. So you can see there's a lot of costs, and one must appreciate this beforehand, and you don't want hidden costs and things coming out in the wash whilst you're purchasing the home and strains your budget. So, I mean, you've got these transfer fees. In the end, you've got bond fees. There is a bit of a cost saving with the new legislation.
Yes, of course.
And then lastly, you've got things that come with financing a home. You need cession of life cover. And then you need to go pay for the life cover. You need a monthly installment on a life cover, which needs to go up. You sometimes, you get fire insurance, all these types of things. And then ultimately also, it's an admin heavy process, so you have various banking costs and the bank administration fees relating to your home loan.
Thank you so much, Abe. This was such an informative session. We've learned so much. Not too exciting because we don't like to pay, but at least we are able to budget and have an idea of what these costs will be. And for those of you at home, please don't forget to tune in next week when we'll be discussing the different mechanisms under which to purchase a property. See you.